Okay, we are up and going. This is the College Prep English class at EIE. And this is our third meeting of our class. You know, the one problem with having the microphone where it is there is people tend to start to enjoy drumming on the table and things like that. And so from time to time, I brought in a cloth or something to put underneath it to dampen the effect of that. If you find yourself doing that, perhaps you could avoid. Okay, let's take a look here at our agenda. Now, generally, I like to send out an agenda so you know exactly what we're going to be covering, and then we have something to ignore when something more interesting comes up, which is fine. But at least this way, we know we're on the same page, and you know what questions I'm going to ask you, and off we go. I've just added a few more things. These things up at the top here are always going to be there. That's just going to let people who aren't here know where to go in order to participate in the class remotely. And this one, of course, is where it will reside on YouTube, so you can go back and look at it later. The open forum has been created. This is for general discussion, anything that doesn't have to do handing in projects. If you want to suggest a book that we might be reading or a video we might should perhaps watch, or you want to even, well, if you post a rebuttal to one of the ideas presented in a video, then that is worthy of being in the writers forum, and that will earn you credit. So indeed, credit can be anything you feel like writing for the time being, as long as we do it in formal English, as long as we satisfy all the requirements of formal English. And the open forum is for other sorts of discussion. Chat room, if you just feel like a chat room, you know what chat rooms are all about. But if you go into it, then when other people come into the main classroom, they will see notification over there that somebody's in the chat room, and they can go and join you. Or you can, if you'd like, post something suggesting a specific time if you feel like doing that. Okay, writing. Last week's assignment was to think about writing topics. Let's discuss ideas. Now, oddly, in looking around at things, I always find things. And there are new things every week that pop up. So if you, first of all, if you are interested in just seeing what kinds of things other people are writing, look through the Writers Forum to see what's there from last year. Unfortunately, only last year is in this Writers Forum. I've got the other big classroom that goes back about 6 years. And there are a lot of interesting things there, all with corrections and suggestions in them. So there's a lot of material there, but new material pops up all the time. I discovered just this week a set of videos. It's a BBC series called The Atom. And I thought it was absolutely fascinating. I don't know how fascinating it would be to others, but Andrew just told me earlier on that he's interested in technology and space, and maybe it would be interesting. It goes through from the early ideas about the existence of an atom up to our current understanding of it, and who made various different contributions to our understanding of it, starting with Rutherford and his discovery of the internal structure of the atom, and then going on with Feynman and his understanding of quantum electro trying to remember the name of it. I think that one might be a very good one. It's very well presented, and if you'd like, I'll give it to you. It's a 3-part series. Okay. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, let's look at that one. As far as reading is concerned, I would just as soon that we left David Copperfield. If you feel like reading it, by all means. If you feel like coming in and doing presentations on it, by all means. But I'm not sure it's our best choice in order to inspire general enthusiasm. And for that reason, I'm going to put it perhaps on the back burner. Peter Pan, look at it and tell me what you think, whether it's something that would inspire you, okay? And we'll look at those. These are both now in our classroom, and that means that they are there in text form and in audiobook form, probably a couple of different audiobook versions. I finally did find fairly decent audiobook versions of both of them. And of course, there have been many movies made of both of these. Are necessarily fragmentary. They're not going to give you everything. Okay, vocabulary journals again. Please post. I can't believe that you haven't encountered words you didn't previously understand in the things that I've given you thus far. So whenever you see those, post something. And if you're not posting something in the vocabulary journal, I just have to assume you need a whole lot more homework because I'm not giving you challenging enough material. So please keep that one up and going. The Ken Robinson talks. We hadn't seen them last week, and now I'm assuming everyone has. What thoughts do you have on his approach, and does it make sense?
I think it does make sense, and what he talks about is we're trying to make people more creative by putting them into a factory setting, and it's counterintuitive, and basically what he explains is why that system doesn't work, and he proposes a new system, and I think that was very interesting. I haven't really thought about it that much until I watched the videos, and it did really kind of like put me into the thought of thinking how can we make the school system better, and something like that.
And here's another question. Of course, he is really grounded in the traditional school system. His wife is a teacher. Well, I mean, he is a teacher, and the concept of traditional classroom is really the only way that he thinks about things. And my contention is that there are so many other alternative ways that you can learn. One of the best ways being, once you learn how to learn, you don't need me, you don't need anybody, especially with the tools that are at your disposal now. Anybody can jump out there and just really learn anything. There are some things you need some help with. If you want to learn a language, you need a native speaker. You don't necessarily need a teacher, but you need a native speaker. You see what I mean? Now, especially if you've learned one or two languages already and you understand the process of learning a language, you really don't need a teacher. But you do need to have an example, someone to imitate. And the same is true, of course, of things like playing a musical instrument. You need to see somebody doing it to understand exactly how it's done. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean you have a teacher-student relationship in which the teacher knows everything and has ultimate authority. You are perfectly capable of learning, but if you want to get it right, you do need something to imitate. You need something to follow. And ideally, and this I think is one of the areas where modern music just falls to pieces, you need to be able to create. Your modern classical musician is still playing things that were written 200 years ago, and every single generation plays the same things. There are new things being written. Most of them are trash. You're probably familiar with that. Why is it? Well, we have to break through that somehow and figure out how to come up with something original that has some real value to it. And of course, you do see that. You see it in film music, you see it in popular music. It does exist out there. There's plenty being written, but classical music is thoroughly moribund. Look it up. Okay, so how does he suggest fostering creativity?
Well, he did talk about how his wife had a classroom full of 40 kids, and all their kids were being creative. And so he says, let them learn at their own pace. because as soon as you put them into an area where they all have to learn at the same rate, then everything just seems to slow down a lot. But if you let them help each other out and learn at their own pace, then they would be able to think creatively.
Very, very nicely put. Very nicely put. Do you have any thoughts, Ezra?
Not really. I forget most of it, but the part that I do remember is he talked about how the companies, large companies, they want people, creative people, but the school children, they come out not being able to creatively think.
Very well put. Yeah, exactly. Indeed, the study that was done by IBM came up with the two solutions: creativity and the ability to adapt. And yet we are teaching using a cookie cutter and trying to be creative with a cookie cutter. There's not a lot of creativity available there. And so how do you foster creativity? That's really the next question on the agenda here. We did that a little bit before. And do you remember what I said about it before? What do you think about how do you create creativity? Is it possible? I'm sorry.
What do I think? Or
yeah.
Just let someone be free. Don't put them in like a box.
Okay. Now, what if you put them in that situation and then they just don't do anything?
I guess that's just. I don't know.
It's an interesting question because Brandon, do you have any thoughts on it?
I think everybody has their own way of being creative. Everybody's different, and everybody learns, everybody thinks, and everybody does things at a different rate. And creativity comes different in everybody.
Yeah, and therefore, what is this formula for fostering creativity?
You could try exposing them to things until they find something they think is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's one approach, but really, what the conclusion one has to come to is that the concept of coming up with a formula for it is itself flawed. Right?
Yeah.
We can't come up with a formula for doing something creative. As soon as you do follow a formula, you've got something formulaic, which is axiomatically not creative. And so, how does one foster creativity? The one big answer, I think, really works very well, and that is immerse yourself in creativity. Look at the creative things of others. You're not going to copy them. You're not going to emulate them, but they do inspire.
Spark
and
ideas.
Go ahead.
Everything like that. Just kind of like spark ideas in your mind and create new ways of thinking.
Right. And so many great minds in history have been so influenced by previous minds, but they're not copying, they're not emulating, they are standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, as that to quote a phrase. So what we need to do is look around and find examples of creativity. I'm going to ask you folks to help me as well, and I've found some good ones that I think would be worthwhile looking at. Specifically, the applications essays here. Remember those? In fact, I actually did assign them to you and asked you to please look at one or two. Does anybody have thoughts about a specific one that you've read? I haven't read the whole book by any means. I just found it.
Well, I read one. It was about an African American girl, and she writes about how the cultural differences were so different back then than what they are from now, and how that has impacted them, or how that has impacted her in her life. And she just wrote about that and what she thinks about thinkers back then and thinkers now, and the social equality. And she found it very inspirational, and her essay got accepted. And that's basically what I read.
Very, very good. Do you remember the name of it? It doesn't ring a bell for me, but I only read about 6 or 7 of them.
It was on like page 22, but I'd have to look up the title again. It was Window or something like that.
Uh-huh. Very good, very good. Did you get a chance to?
I didn't read anything from that book, but I read application essay from a different source.
Oh, you did? Okay. And what type of essay was it? What was it about?
It was a girl, and she was talking about how the standard is different for. She's she has 2 brothers, and she's the only girl. So the standard is different for her than her brothers. She's not expected to do what her brothers do. So
I see. And what culture are we talking about here?
she was Latino.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Brian, any thoughts?
I read from a different source as well, and it was talking about how music theory and just music in general changed this person's life, and he's used it to, like, in his everyday life when it comes to talking to people and writing essays even, and it was just really like cool how he uses it in his everyday life, and it's something that I really didn't think you could use in your everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really cool.
So many of these winning essays managed to grasp one concept like that. There was the girl from Romania who went mad about Spanish. You may have seen that as one of them. And your one with music, in which they draw an analogy, in fact, make a metaphor out of one specific field of study and how it affects all the other things that they do. Indeed, it sounds as though that's almost a formula for success, or at least it's one of the elements that tends to be successful when it's properly fleshed out and realized. So we should probably put together a list of those things that are necessary for that kind of an essay. A few things we already know. It's got to be in formal English. You'll find that all of these are in formal English, but not one of them has no mistakes in it. So it's got to be in formal English, and it's got to have at least some minor mistakes in it. Otherwise, it looks as though it's gone through an editor, and you don't want that. One needs to have something that talks about oneself and tells the admissions officer something about what you are and what makes you unique. Did you read the commentary of the admissions officers at the beginning of this book? That one's really worth reading, which is fine. I mean, each one of these admissions officers was explaining what sort of things he or she was looking for and what sort of things that they found. And then later on, they put in their comments at the end of each one of the papers. And this is very insightful. It's missing the one big thing that I would love to see, and that is admissions officers commenting on each other's commentary. The extent to which they are unanimous in their approach, I think, is highly questionable. They may well have very different approaches, and it would be interesting to know how much they vary. But thank you indeed for doing that. Was this a worthwhile exercise?
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay, let's do some more of that if you don't mind. And did you all succeed in downloading this the copy of this set of essays?
I didn't download it. I just looked at a webpage.
Yep.
Because all the ones I found, you had to pay $11 or something.
Okay, well, that's why I gave you something here that you don't have to pay $11 for. And trust me, these if you go in to the web and you look for places that are going to provide you with essays, and a lot of them are just selling the essays, expecting you to be able to take them and just turn them in as they are, which, as you know, is plagiarism. It's not specifically plagiarism. The better word for that is cyber pseudepigraphy. You ever heard of the word pseudepigraphy before?
No.
It's false attribution. In other words, I write something, then I put your name on it, or put somebody else's name on it. or in the case of the Bible, put God's name on it, or something like that. That's pseudepigraphy. And cyber pseudepigraphy is doing that when it's, why doesn't? Cyber pseudepigraphy is doing that online. And there's just an immense market for that sort of thing, and naturally a response to that market. I have in my other classroom, and I'll bring it in if it's of any real interest to you folks, some essays that I found in an online essay database like that. And they are abysmal. They are just egregious and full of errors, but they're selling it to people who can't tell the difference. And so, trust me, you can't trust them. When it comes to serious works, like the one I've given you there, which is just essentially the same thing as this earlier book, which I own, these work, and these are correct, because they are the ones that actually worked to get somebody into these institutions, and they have their errors in them. But you wouldn't believe the level of errors that you find in so many of these online databases. In fact, it's a wonderful resource for examples of how not to write an essay. And it might be worth our while to go out there and do a little research and find some of them and take them apart. Okay, so let's go ahead and read some more of those and do some presentations. And please, when you do a presentation, if you wouldn't mind, if you have it in machine readable form, perhaps you could bring it in machine readable form and read selections from it or something like that, so that we can do a serious analysis of it. All right, vocabulary journal, of course. I've asked you all, make sure to post into your vocabulary journal any words that you do not understand. Have you understood every word that has taken place in this classroom thus far today?
No.
No, I shouldn't think so. Please make sure to write them down, and I don't mean write them down. There's too many pencils and paper on this table. Doesn't anybody use modern technology? Okay, you can use whatever you like. You can use stylus and play tablet if you feel like it, but you're welcome to use modern technology. I think that's always to be recommended. Okay, this short video on English pedantry. You've all seen that, right?
I did not see that.
I have not.
You haven't?
Yeah.
Azariah? Okay, I thought I had thrown that in with the added assignments that I posted, I guess it was Sunday.
Let me check.
Now, please note those when they come by. Usually, I'll get together some sort of notes and assignments for Friday. And then if I see something new, I'll post it on there and add it to the list. So please look at those. I'm almost tempted to play this one now and look at it, but yeah, let's give it a try. I think it presents us with so much to talk about. And I found that this week we had less to talk about than usual because I didn't have any projects handed in, and usually that takes a fair amount of time. So let's just take a couple minutes. This is, how long is it? I'm not sure. Maybe 6 minutes.
For me, it's a cause of some upset that more Anglophones don't enjoy language. Music is enjoyable, it seems, so are dance and other athletic forms of movement. People seem to be able to find sensual and sensuous pleasure in almost anything but words these days. Words, it seems, belong to other people. Anyone who expresses themselves with originality, delight, and verbal freshness is more likely to be mocked, distrusted, or disliked than welcomed. The free and happy use of words appears to be considered elitist or pretentious. Sadly, desperately sadly, the only people who seem to bother with language in public today bother with it in quite the wrong way. They write letters to broadcasters and newspapers in which they are rude and haughty about other people's usage, and in which they show off their own superior knowledge of how language should be. I hate that, and I particularly hate the fact that so many of these pedants assume that I'm on their side. When asked to join in a "let's persuade this supermarket chain to get rid of their 5 items or less" sign, I never join in. Yes, I am aware of the technical distinction between less and fewer, and between uninterested and disinterested, and infer and imply and all the rest of them, but none of these are of importance to me. None of these are of importance, I said there. You'll notice the old pedantic me would have insisted on none of them is of importance. Well, I'm glad to say I've outgrown that silly approach to language. Oscar Wilde, and there have been few greater and more complete lords of language in the past 1,000 years, once included with a manuscript he was delivering to his publishers a compliment slip in which he had scribbled the injunction, "I'll leave you to tidy up the woulds and shoulds, wills and shalls, that's and whiches, etc." Which gives us all encouragement to feel less guilty, don't you think? There are all kinds of pedants around with more time to read and imitate Lynn Truss and John Humphreys than to write poems, love letters, novels and stories, it seems. They whip out their Sharpies and take away and add apostrophes from public signs, shake their heads at prepositions which end sentences, and mutter at split infinitives and misspellings. But do they bubble and froth and slobber and cream with joy at language? Do they ever let the tripping of the tips of their tongues against the tops of their teeth transport them to giddy euphoric bliss? Do they ever yoke impossible words together for the sound sex of it? Do they use language to seduce, charm, excite, please, affirm and tickle those they talk to? Do they? I doubt it. They're too farting busy sneering at a greengrocer's less than perfect use of the apostrophe. Well, sod them to Hades. They think they're guardians of language. They're no more guardians of language than the Kennel Club is the guardian of dog kind. And the worst of this sorry bunch of semi-educated losers are those who seem to glory in being irritated by nouns becoming verbs. How dense and deft a language development do you have to be? If you don't like nouns becoming verbs, then for heaven's sake avoid Shakespeare, who made a doing word out of a thing word every chance he got. He tabled the motion and chaired the meeting in which nouns were made verbs. I suppose new examples from our time might take some getting used to. He actioned it that day, for instance, might strike some as a verbing too far, but we've been sanctioning, envisioning, propositioning and stationing for a long time, so why not actioning? Because it's ugly, whinge the pedants. Well, it's only ugly because it's new and you don't like it. Ugly in the way Picasso, Stravinsky and Eliot were once thought ugly, and before them Monet, Mahler and Baudelaire. Pedants will also claim, with what I'm sure is eye-popping insincerity and shameless disingenuousness, that their fight is only for clarity. Well, this is all very well, but there's no doubt what, for example, 5 items or less means. Just as only a dolt can't tell from the context and from the age and education of the speaker whether disinterested is used in the proper sense of non-partisan or in the improper sense of uninterested. No. Now, the claim to be defending language for the sake of clarity almost never ever holds water, nor does the idea that following grammatical rules in language demonstrates clarity of thought and intelligence of mind. Having said this, I admit that if you want to communicate well for the sake of passing an exam or job interview, then it's obvious that wildly original and excessively heterodox language could land you in the soup. I think what offends examiners and employers when confronted with extremely informal, unpunctuated and haywire language is the implication of not caring that underlies it. You slip into a suit for an interview and you dress your language up too. You can wear what you like linguistically or sartorially when you're at home or with friends, but most people accept the need to smarten up under some circumstances. It's only considerate. But that's an issue of fitness, of suitability. It has nothing to do with correctness. There's no right language or wrong language any more than there are right or wrong clothes. Context, convention, and circumstance are all. I can't deny that a small part of me still clings to a ghastly Radio 4 newspaper letter writer pedantry, but I fight against it in much the same way I try to fight against my gluttony, anger, selfishness, and other vices. I must confess, for example, that I find it hard not to wince when someone aspirates a word it isn't.
Okay. Watch it again, perhaps 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
What is he talking about? You've seen this one before,
Yeah.
Dawson. What do you think?
I think it's interesting. Of course, he uses language well.
There are few people who use language as well as he does. That's one of the reasons people take exception to his defense of people who use it badly.
Yeah. I don't really know what to say.
Okay, what's his primary thesis?
It seemed he's annoyed about people who make small corrections because they think their understanding of language is higher than everyone else.
Oh, he does say that, but what is the point he's really getting to? Language is an art form. He doesn't say it that way, but language is to be appreciated, to be understood, and to be exalted in. And he feels that those who are excessively pedantic, the word pedantic is one I'd like you to understand, that they so rarely actually use and appreciate language used as an art form. And indeed, he does use it as an art form. However, he also does not make errors. And he also made it very clear at one point in there, I wish I could remember exactly what the words were, but context is what's important. It has to fit the context. There's no such thing as language which is right or wrong. Is it appropriate for a particular context? Now, those of you who have read the introduction in the book, and I'm sure you all have, you'll notice that I say something very similar there, although I said it long before this came out, or at least that I saw this one, in that it's under a title that reads, "What is correct English?" And we went through that the second day, I think. For really, it is a matter of context. It's a matter of where are you using the language and what effect is it going to have. I go beyond that in the book by saying that as long as the message you have is adequately understood and the impression you want to give is correct and successfully presented, then it's the right language. And that's going to depend entirely on where you are and whom you're talking to. And so what is the right answer? The right answer is going to depend on where you are. But if we're aiming at university, if we're aiming at writing things for admissions officers, we know the answer to that. We know which language is going to be the one that's going to be appreciated. And it's one that does understand the distinction between, for example, uninterested and disinterested, imply and infer. Fry, incidentally, is wrong about none. He is of the opinion, which has been a long misunderstood opinion, that none is actually drawn from not one and is therefore singular. Turns out that it's older than that. It's drawn from another earlier word that could be used in plural just as well as singular. So there's no reason to assume that none of them is the only one to say it. That none of them are is perfectly acceptable. However, Then you have to stand back and say, okay, how many people on this evaluation committee are going to really understand that? And how many of them are under the misconception, or working under the misconception that none has to be singular. So sometimes we have to make sure not just to be right, but to be right in the same world as our audience is, and to take our audience into account. When it comes to splitting infinitives, he split infinitives in there. He also broke the synesis rule, which is one that I'll talk about a good deal later on. But these are rules that so many people break all the time, and nobody regards them as serious rules. It's worth knowing what they are, but they're not necessarily major problems. However, you never know. You might actually encounter somebody who would be offended by your misuse of something. This list of words here, Anglophone, interesting. Anyone who essentially speaks English, and the difference between sensual and sensuous, elitist, pretentious, pedant, talked about that. Uninterested, disinterested, infer and imply. I suggest you take these and put them into your vocabulary journals. Look them up, try to understand the difference between them. And we'll go through them at some point. Yeah, just pull them right off the page. One of the reasons I give you everything like this in the classroom is so you don't have to waste time with pencil and paper. I have actually seen classes, believe me, I've actually seen classes in which the teacher comes in and fills the board full of stuff and then tells the class to sit there and copy it down, and that's what the whole class consists of. I just can't believe anything as idiotic as that. This is teaching? Anyway, you do not have to sit and write these things down. They're in your classroom. You can cut and paste them into anything you want. Okay, let's go back to our agenda. All right. Again, I assigned this one, and I'm going to assign it again because it's not something you'll get first time through. If you see any other words up there that you're unfamiliar with, please write them down. We've talked about Copperfield and Peter Pan, and I've here under language immersion, I found something which I think might well inspire. It might indeed inspire you to want to take a position for or against, and perhaps write a position paper, perhaps like to give a speech. Perhaps we should have a debate if we feel like taking opposite sides of the issue. This fellow here, his name's Peter Hitchens. You've already seen one of his things, which I did assign for today. What did you think of his speech on freedom of speech? Did nobody see it?
No, I
Okay,
didn't.
now that did come out on Friday as part of the updated assignments, right? When you receive updated assignments, please look through them and please do them, okay? Okay, he talks about freedom of speech, and I think he does a very fine job. He's an interesting character. He is a right-wing conservative, devout Christian. He expresses himself well. He doesn't mind if he's doing so in front of an audience that finds his opinions unpopular, and does a nice job of it. I have added another of his talks, which I just discovered this morning here in the classroom, and I'm tempted to assign that. I think it would be particularly appropriate. His contention is, and this, as is the case with so many of these assignments I'm giving you, we're looking at the works of an author whose publisher sent him on a book tour. And that's why the video is on YouTube. Nobody wants to copyright the promotional material from a book tour. That's out there in order to sell the book. Anyway, he's recently written a book on this subject, and he's maintaining there is no war on drugs. What he means by that is our war on drugs is disingenuous and ineffectual, and that it doesn't really exist in any real sense, and it should. That's the condition, the contention that he is making. In other words, he thinks drugs should be seriously illegalized and that the laws should be enforced. And specifically, he aims at cannabis. It's interesting to take that, to see that perspective on things, because you see the opposite perspective presented by equally lucid and fecund speakers. And we could perhaps look at both. Does anybody have any thoughts on that particular issue? Anybody come down on one side of it or the other? If we were to have a debate on whether drugs or certain drugs should be legalized or not, would there be any contention? Doesn't sound as though I've hit a chord that's actually of any real interest to anybody. Okay, I still think it would be interesting to watch this. One of the other points I feel like making here, which is an interesting one, is in that talk on drugs, there are two mentions made of his brother. Now, has anybody ever heard of him before? Have anybody ever heard of Christopher Hitchens before? Okay, Christopher Hitchens is his brother, and it's sort of interesting when at the end the moderator holds up the book that Peter Hitchens has just written and said, "Well, after all, he's a Hitchens, so the writing is superb." And of course, that's a reference to his brother who died a couple of years ago, and whose oratory and whose writing was absolutely marvelous. And I enjoyed it immensely, especially for the fact that he read his own audiobooks. And I'm not going to necessarily recommend them to you, because he and Peter Hitchens agreed on almost nothing. He was a left-wing Trotskyist and one of the major disparagers of religion. And one of his last books was God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. So there are actually some interesting, fascinating debates between the two brothers that really use the English language to its greatest extent. Okay, these are the older assignments from before. Make sure always to get the old ones done. And I've added some material down here that I suspected we would have time for, because I don't have projects to go through this week. I'm sure I will have a number of projects to go through next week, right?
Hopefully.
Okay. And let's see if we can't come to some conclusions on what you would like to write. I know I was asked last week, give us a topic, give us a subject. And I managed to weasel out of that, because I really don't want to inflict my concept of a subject upon you. On the other hand, that doesn't help you come up with one on your own particularly well. So let's see if we can figure those out. I like your idea of writing letters. Letter writing is one of the is a wonderful art, and in fact, I found some of the most wonderful audiobooks are simply the letters of so-and-so, they're letters of so-and-so, especially when you're talking about writers who can really write, writing to other writers who can really write. For example, the Browning correspondence between Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, absolutely amazing use of language. But you find a few others and interesting ones that we could look at. So maybe I'll dig up some of those or leave it to you. Think about people whom you would like to write to. You can write, for example, to write to the Pope if you feel like it. I mean, we could find recipients to whom writing would perhaps inspire some interesting thoughts. Okay, I took a couple of projects from previous years and put them up here in the absence of anything this week. We can look at those if we run out of other things to do, but I think it would be worthwhile looking at them anyway so you can see what kinds of commentary you can expect. Structure of a basic book report. Well, you may have noticed that there was one project that came in that went into the forum labeled "Not for Class Discussion," and it was a film report. And I think it's important to understand what a book report is all about. How many of you have written book reports at one point or another? Right, and I can see a sort of reluctance and aversion to the entire thought of book reports, and I don't blame you. What this little thing does, and it's in our classroom, let me find it here. I think I'm going to shut that. How to write a book report, basic level book report. Now, one of the things to understand about writing a book report is a book report is not just a blow-by-blow description of the content of the book. And this is a checklist of things that go into a book report that really make writing a book report so quick and easy. Just go down and follow this checklist. What is the title? Yeah, there are people who don't put the title of the book they're reviewing in their book report. Why you chose this book? Well, it might have been assigned to you, or you might have chosen it. What kind of a story is it? You got to figure out what genre it fits into. Adventure, family, fantasy, make-believe, animal, true life, scary. It sounds as though they're not really talking at all about nonfiction there. The body of the book report. You describe the main parts of the story, the theme, the plot, the setting, and the characters, and give your opinions about the book. Now notice, this is not the big part of the book report. This is just one little paragraph that talks about the main theme, the characters, and the conflicts in it. And then we go in and the theme, what's the main idea of the story, and where is it set, and when. Okay, and now you talk about what happens in the plot, but it's sometimes this is what most people seem to think an entire is the whole book report, but it's just one little part there, and it says it here very clearly. Be careful not to retell the whole story in detail. You want room in your report for other things. Instead, say just enough of it so the rest of your report makes sense. That's a big one. Just enough so the rest of your report makes sense. Who are the characters? And once you've summarized it and done the characters, then did you like it? And what are your reasons for that conclusion? What was the best part of the book? How did it make you feel? Did you feel different things? Do you see what I mean? Now, if you've read a book and you go through this checklist, you'll find that the book report just writes itself. All you've got to do is look at these questions and say, I got to put that one in. And then you'll have the report finished before you know it. And then, of course, a bit of a conclusion at the end. You can do a more elaborate book report than this, by all means. But I think that this will make it easy for you. And if you feel like writing a book report, by all means, go ahead and do this. This applies also to film and theater or anything else you feel like. Okay, let's go back here. Okay, I have a couple of other things I wanted to look at. Okay, here's one, probably up here somewhere. Yeah. This is called The Chaos, and it's about English and English pronunciation. I'd like to share that with you. You haven't seen this one before, have you?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. This is really aimed at people who are learning English and learning how to pronounce English by reading it, and quickly learning that our spelling of the language is absolutely absurd when you understand that spelling and pronunciation really have very little commonality and very little one-to-one correspondence. Just little things like just compare heart, beard, and herd. Notice that all three of those have an EA as the vowel. EA, EA, and yet they're totally pronounced totally differently. Heart, beard, and herd. Dies and diet. Lord and word. Nicely constructed poem that illustrates the absurdities of the English language. Just thought I'd loose you on it if you found it interesting. I'll throw this in as an assignment. The challenge, of course, is to read through this entire thing and get all the pronunciation right. Note that I have done it here. It's on. There's an audio file there. It has one mistake in it. See if you can find it. Okay, now this was something else I wanted to look at. Can everyone see this well enough? Is it focused well enough? Mm-hmm. This is just a listing of homophones. You've seen this kind of thing before in a dozen places, but I find sometimes it's a nice place to start. Let's go through these, starting out by simply using the word correctly in a sentence. And then we'll see how well we can do with coming up with actual definitions of them. It gives us a starting point for improvisatory speaking. And let's sort of go around the table and see how we go. Well, where shall we start? I don't want to start at the A's. Let's start in the middle here and see how we go. Let's start right there. Okay, Dawson, can you take that first word, minor, and use it in a sentence?
There was a miner.
That doesn't help us a lot.
Who found gold.
Okay,
yeah.
A miner found gold. One who mines, one who works in a mine.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's exactly right. What about the second one there? Azrai? M-I-N-O-R.
He was still a minor.
Good. Yeah, that's exactly right. He was still a minor. He had not yet become 21. Okay, how about the last one there? Notice that it's not a perfect, at least in American pronunciation, it's not really a homophone. M-Y-N-A-H. Any idea? Okay. It's a type of bird. It's a black bird that speaks, minor bird. Okay. Next one around there. Brian, can you use these two?
He was discussing thoughts within his mind.
Good. That works fine. Andrew?
He mined gold out of the rocks.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. How about Dawson, the next one.
He missed them.
You missed them? Okay.
Or
We missed the deadline or whatever it is. Okay, is right.
You saw nothing through the mist.
You saw nothing through the mist. Very nicely done. You folks are doing just great. Okay, let's look at the next one there, Brian.
He switched his sports car into lunatic mode.
I think you skipped one.
Did I?
These are the ones I was looking at. That's fine. We'll skip it. He switched his sports car into what mode?
Lunatic mode.
Lunatic mode. I like that. I like that. Okay. Andrew, how about this one?
Sally mowed the front lawn.
Excellent. Excellent. Did you know that the word mow is much older than the word than the lawnmower is?
I did not.
Indeed, to mow a meadow would be done with a scythe, but they used the same word for it. And it's an interesting thing. If you look around on the internet, you will find that there are scythe competitions, and the one who wins them all, her name is Fairlight Vido, and she was 15 years old when she won the scythe competition, barefoot in a dress, and you have all of these guys out there swinging their scythes. Absolute expert. You'll find some interesting things online. Okay, let's see. How about this one? See how we can do with these. Where are we here? Andrew, Dawson.
They walked across the moor.
They walked across the moor. Excellent. Yeah, everybody knows the other one. Well, I'm not sure how. Oh yes, I'm sure nobody's going to have any trouble with that. These have all been so easy. Okay. Okay. Now, using them properly in sentence is a good deal easier than defining them. Now, when I talk about defining them, I mean coming up with a definition akin to that which one would find in the dictionary, not necessarily word for word. So we try some of these that we've just done and come up with a definition for them. Miner.
Someone who mines.
Yeah, or someone who works in a mine. Yeah. Okay, the next one. Minor. M-I-N-O-R.
Someone under the age of 21.
Okay. Or someone who has not yet come of age, whatever age that might be in whatever environment you're in. Excellent. And the mine is the bird. Let's not worry about that one. How about the next one? How do we define that? That's a hard one to define. Okay, I'm going to give it a shot at it and see what you think. The supposed repository of the thinking process in the human being. Now, whether or not that is physical is a different question, perhaps a theological question, but the supposed location of the thinking process. Okay, let's skip mind there, missed. Okay, let's define that one. We skipped that line first time through.
Be a defensive, trench, usually filled with water.
Yeah, very good. A trench usually filled with water, generally for a specific purpose.
Yeah, usually from a defense.
For what?
Defense.
Yeah, as part of a fortification, I think you'd have to say for a moat. The castle was surrounded by a moat, and indeed a moat would be a trench, usually filled with water. In fact, I think always filled with water, for the purposes of defense. Okay. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure exactly. Now here, when we don't know what something is, do you see what we do with it? Right click on it, pop over there and see what the world says about it. Very small particle, a speck.
Oh, wow.
And indeed, Shakespeare talks about a mote in the eye, a tiny particle or a speck. Okay, so we cheated on that one. Mode, this is a hard one to define. Somebody want to give that a try?
A setting that you can put something in.
Okay, that works. Indeed, if you have a switch between different modes, and including lunatic at the bottom of the, I think that's wonderful. Yeah, that would be it. Or perhaps I had a word a moment ago, but I can't think of it right now. Let's just go with what you said. I think that works fine. And just for the sake of it, let's give a definition for that one. Nobody? You all know what it means, right?
Just to cut down.
Okay, to cut
Yeah.
down. But first of all, we'll probably say it's the past tense of the verb mow. And mow is the verb that's used for cutting things down, usually grasses, though it might be something else as well. It would be for cutting the crops in a field, and so that they can be harvested. Although we don't think of it in that term when we think of mowing the lawn. Okay. And moor, what would you use for moor? It's a particular configuration of plants and bracken to be found commonly in wild areas, often in Scotland, but there are other places. And how about moose? Can anybody give me a good definition of the word moose? I didn't realize I'm giving you such terrible conversation stoppers here. You know, all of you, what a moose is. If one walked in the door, none of you would mistake it for an armadillo. Okay.
It's just a matter of putting the words into place and making.
That's exactly right.
That's
And
what I'm trying
I know it's hard, but that's one of the things we want to get good at. Okay, moose. Well, it's actually the largest member of the deer family. And it's the family is Artiodactyli. Has anybody ever heard that word? It means, I'm sorry?
I think I might have heard of that, the word.
Oh, okay. Artiodactyli are those ungulates with an even number of toes. So that would be goats and sheep and deer and antelope would all fall into those categories, but not the horse and not the tapir. Those would actually the elephant is also Artiodactylus. Okay, but it has to be a deer because indeed the moose sheds its antlers, which antelope do not. Okay, this is in our classroom now, and I think it would be wise and probably worthwhile to know them all. Does anybody see something up there that they would like to shoot at? Let's see if you can give us a good definition. Why don't we take those three there? Okay, let's give the first one a shot. No? I'm sorry. I'm definitely aiming in the wrong direction if I haven't got people saying, yes, yes, let me do it. Okay. Okay.
It's something which has a lot of holes.
Right.
in it.
That's something riddled with holes would be holy, Holey. How about the second one?
Something you'd usually associate with like a
Religion.
god or a religion.
Okay, or indeed something sacred, something of religious significance would be something holy. How about the last one?
Something in its entirety.
Very good, very good. That's exactly right. The entirety of something, something complete. Okay, how about the next one here? How would you define this?
60 minutes.
Okay, that's one good way to do it. But in the process of saying it's 60 minutes, we're implying that we know that it is a measure, it's a time unit. Okay, so we'd start out probably saying that it's a measurement of time, a unit for measuring time, and defining it in terms of another time unit like minutes doesn't help us a great deal in determining its universal applicability. How would we do that?
You could say it's a measurement of time that contains 60 minutes.
Well, there again, we're using minutes. Why don't we define it in terms of something else? For example, the rotation of the Earth.
There are 24 hours in a day.
Okay, but the day again is is another time unit. We would say something like a time unit equal to 1/24th of the length of time it takes the Earth to rotate around entirely. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're pinning it down there to something that's not just another time unit,
Mhm.
but something that has some universal significance. Okay, how about these? Idle.
Something that is still.
Okay, something that is still. Yeah, it's certainly if it's still, it's probably idle, but it's not in the process of producing or doing something. Right, it's idle, and one could be perhaps accuse someone or something that's idle of being torpid. Another word that we came across before. How about an idol? IDOL.
Something that could represent a god.
Yeah. I think that's a very good one. There's a poem that I enjoyed at some point. There's a one-eyed yellow idol. There's a green-eyed yellow idol on the road to Kathmandu. Has anybody ever heard that one? It's a fascinating little poem. It's been used and copied in. I saw a cartoon yesterday which was referring to it. That's why it came to mind. Where do you find a cartoon that refers to poetry like that? Okay, well, I'm going to suggest this to you if you're at all interested. There's a series of cartoons called Danger Mouse. It's an absurd thing. It's cartoons about a secret agent who's a mouse who lives in a pillar box. But the writers are brilliant. It's utterly brilliant. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't noticed that one down there. Somebody want to give this one a try? What's the first one? Has anybody ever played pool?
Cue ball.
Okay. It's the cue ball, but what is the cue? Yeah. It's a stick.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's a stick. Normally a conical stick, weighted at the back end for use in playing billiards or pool. Does that sound like a good definition?
Mm-hmm.
What about the second one here? Does anybody know what that one means?
I have not heard of it
No,
before.
either.
Have none of you ever studied a martial art?
Yeah.
I have, but
I
How
don't
far in the
remember.
rankings did you get?
not very far.
Okay, that's the ranking up to the black belt in a number of different martial arts. It's a Japanese word, kyu. First kyu,
Wow.
second kyu, third kyu. Okay, how about this kyu?
It's a line.
The word line has so many different meanings. The word kyu has far fewer.
A line of people waiting. I guess. I mean,
Okay,
people waiting in line.
no, absolutely. That would be the way we'd say it in English. Indeed, I'm sorry, in American. In English, a queue would be what you would stand in. If you're waiting at the post office, for example, you stand in a queue. Here we would stand in a line. But ever since computer science became a commonly studied subject, we all know what a queue means because it's specific data organization. They call it a FIFO structure, or a first in, first out structure. A queue is a place, a virtual place in memory for storing information into which one puts something in the same order that it comes out. So if I stick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into the queue, it's going to come out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I stick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into a stack, it comes out 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. I think we probably exhausted this, but this kind of game is something that I would like to play further, because I think you folks in that brief period of time got a concept for what you need to do in order to provide a definition, or even just to put something into a sentence in context.
Mhm.
And this is going to come so quickly for you that you're going to be able to just run at these and go down through them very quickly. Very useful skill to acquire. Okay, let's see. We did the homophone listing. We did the chaos structure basic book report. We've got 10 minutes. There are a lot of different things we can do in 10 minutes, but I want to make sure to get through the must-do things first. And that is, do we have everything figured out for working this coming week? You all have some sort of an idea of what you might like to write about? You're going to write a letter, right? Okay. Now, when you write a letter, of course, the old-fashioned way to make this as unpleasant a process as possible is to go through all of this list of things. You've got to have your salutation, your closing, and you've got to indent things correctly and use the right punctuation at the end of the recipient's name, depending on whether it's a personal letter or a formal letter. Idiotic stuff. That's mechanical garbage. And the reason I say it's idiotic and absurd is you don't do that sort of thing anymore. In today's world, you pull up a template and fill it in.
Mhm.
And the mechanical part of it has also absolutely nothing to do with the creative process. Yes, we do want to have everything mechanically so that it looks right, because just like saying something to somebody, the appearance of your letter tells them who you are. And so we get all of those things right, but we get those right because we just get the computer to do it for us. On the other hand, we want to be creative with it. And to do that, perhaps we want to look at some of the great letters that have been written. One needn't necessarily, but who writes wonderful letters? I'm not familiar with all of these, but I know there are letter compilations by Abraham Lincoln, by Winston Churchill, by Mahatma Gandhi, there are a number of, well, Gandhi is probably not the best choice because English was not his first language, which is Gujarati, but he did his study and passed his bar exam in England, so he definitely had a handle on English, far better probably than most college graduates in this country. But those are examples. Certainly, Lincoln and Churchill, I think, would be wonderful examples of for letter writing. Okay, other areas we'd like to consider, perhaps. Let me list some genres that would work for you, perhaps. Simple things like a narrative, describing something that actually has happened to you or something you can imagine. It can be fictitious or nonfiction, whichever you prefer. Or you can explain how to do something that you're good at. Suppose it's building a rocket, picking a lock, making a rabbit hutch, digging a septic tank. I don't know. If there's anything that you know something about how to do, or even if you don't, try to make your reader believe that you do, and put something entirely spurious together. Just thoughts, okay? You can take a position one side of an issue. We had a number of issues come up here, and again, I don't want to push one side or the other of issues like, for example, war on drugs, theology, immigration. There's so many different issues that are out there right now, and we could write in favor of or in opposition to. Does anybody have any specific things they're interested in? Global warming.
Personally, I was thinking about writing on technology,
Right.
and the progression of technology, because we're in kind of this transition where robots are starting to take over more and more jobs of humans, like factory jobs and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And so I was thinking I might be able to write about that.
I think that's a wonderful topic. You're going to find an awful lot of material there, and among those things, there's a new concept that people are talking about more and more. You know what AI is, right?
Yeah.
The question is, where will AI be in 10 years from now? 15 years from now? Is it possible that computers are going to get to a point where they manage to improve their own code? And if that does happen, how rapidly will things take off from that point, and we'll find that computer code is in a totally different world than anything that humans have ever had anything to do with. It's been described as a singularity in the same sense as a black hole singularity, I suppose. But indeed, it's a question. It's something that could happen, and the way Hawking puts it is, it will be an immense achievement if humanity manages to accomplish artificial intelligence, but it may be its last accomplishment, because that's one possible way that the world may self-destruct that nobody really even thought of much before. We can see a lot of other problems around, or reasons to believe that humanity and perhaps even the world as such are not going to survive this century. How many can you think of? Well, there's some that pop immediately into mind, right? There's nuclear destruction. Okay. How about global warming?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about it?
Some basic stuff, like how all our factories and cars and everything are polluting the world, and especially with the whole Volkswagen thing, how their cars are like 40 times over the legal limit.
Interesting point. Yeah. Well, one of the big arguments there is that we may already have passed that point on the slippery slope where reversal is no longer possible. As we manage to melt the ice caps, which up to this point have had a high albedo and have realized what that albedo means. It reflects a great deal of light and reflects much of the heat back out. But as the ice caps are reduced in size, that reflection is reduced as well. And we might already be on an irreversible path to becoming a planet like Venus. I mean, it's been postulated, and then other people say, oh, it's all a bunch of garbage. It's none of this makes any sense. And one of the big questions then you have to ask yourself is, which way would I rather be wrong? Okay, just some thoughts. Any other issues that are of specific interest? Things like sports in school. Do they belong in school? Do they teach you something worthwhile?
I think so.
What sort of things do you folks do for physical exercise as homeschoolers?
I work out at home every day.
Mhm.
Run.
What kind of workouts do you do?
High intensity intervals training, where basically you go as hard as you can, possibly like push yourself for like around 1 minute and then rest for 30 seconds. And it puts your metabolism into overdrive, and you continue burning fat for the next 2 days.
Wow.
Mhm.
You want to write a paper on it?
I mean,
You needn't, of course, write a paper on it. I'm sure you can go out and find one, but it certainly deserves that. It's not something I'm familiar with. Have any of the rest of you seen that at all?
Nope.
Never heard of it.
It's something that would benefit the class if you feel like putting
It's
something
helpful.
together. What about the rest of you? Do you do any team sports or?
Well, I enjoy mountain biking and running, and I do those at least weekly,
Mhm.
if not every other day. And I live up in like a hilly area, so it's really fun to just take my bike around on the hiking trails and stuff like that.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful thing to do. Azariah?
And play soccer.
Soccer?
I do something called I'm a medieval martial arts.
Oh, okay. Are you in the SDCI? Is it Society for Creative Anachronism?
I'm part of God, what is it called?
LARP?
No, that's not LARPing. It's like a part of HEMA. I think it's called. AOA or something like that. Yeah. But we just study medieval manuscripts on things such as long sword fighting and that kind of stuff, and we try to use them in practical ways.
Oh, this is absolutely fascinating. I think we would all love to see a paper on that. Anything?
Yeah.
Any chance of that? My understanding of medieval literature was there was very little real reference made to the technology and the details of that sort of thing. I mean, they talk about the two knights came in and this one overpowered that one, and they never say anything about how or what they did or what they were wearing or what they were carrying. There seems to be very little in literature from that period that got into any detail.
Yeah. Well, actually, that is one of the main problems. Is that they don't leave behind a lot of, I guess, details and manuscripts and so forth. So.
Mm-hmm. I think you folks are full of ideas. You folks have all kinds of things that you can bring in and present. I look forward to seeing. Okay. So for next time, I'll try to remember what it was that I was going to post up here and add to it. And you folks hand some things in, post some questions, and make sure to look at the things that I send out. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I've got to make sure that you get your account. So
Yes.
if you don't get something from me, send me an email.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring our EIE class at excellence in education to an end here.